First of all, I want to introduce myself. I'm Pablo. I'm the co-director of Agora. And here we also have Laura. She's the co-director of Agora and also of the Experimental Photo Festival. We started this school of experimental photography 3 years ago after working a lot with the festival and with online content. And we realized that people really want to get engaged in learning during the full year. And that is perfect because you can learn the techniques with the most important artists of each of the techniques, and then you can come to the festival and meet them. That's great. That's why we have these kind of two activities, and we are really happy. Overworking these 3-4 years with Agora, it has been really interesting for knowing, for having more information, for having more documentation also about the techniques, and we are really happy of having engaged this project of Agora 4 years ago. And it's amazing that you are here sharing tonight with us in a Friday night a little bit more about what we are going to talk. It's interesting because we saw that there are a lot of people interested in these kind of things. We saw how this thing is growing. And at the end of the conversation, we are going to see some of the reasons. Today, we are going to be talking about analog photography, digital, post-photography, and experimental photography. These are the big four themes that we are going to be working. That in some moment, it can look like that there are kind of different moments on the history, but the reality is that most of them are pretty mixed. Okay, today we're going to work with 12 revolution that has created the photography as we know it now. And you are going to see that 7 of them are analogic, 3 are digital, and 2 are experimental. And if you have any questions, for sure, you can make comments, you can raise your hand, or you can put the comment on comments, and then Laura is going to pick them, and then we are going to comment. And also in the end of this conversation, we are going to have a time for questions and answers. If you want to say something, that's also perfect. We want to know more about you, and this is kind of an interactive thing. We are going to be 40 minutes or 45 talking about this history, some influences, some references, and some ideas on how to start your own projects. And then we will have a time for this for the questions. Okay. You can raise your hand. I already said that. Great. Okay, let's go with. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Okay. Let's go. First revolution number 7 is the visual and optical thinking. Obviously, we are not able to have modern photography, so to say, if we are not able to understand how a photography thinks. In the theory of photography, everything of this is called pre-photography, and there are thinkers about Plato, Socrates, and others that work at the beginning with these kind of ideas. Here you can see the allegory of the cave of Plato. And this is a new interpretation about how mobile phones are related with the allegory of the cave. This is a thing that is really work on the theory of photography. We are not going to get into more with this, but I want you to understand this, that there is a long story of pre-photography. Photography is something modern. Everything that happens to prepare us for the first revolution normally is not work, but is really important. What we are going to do is we are going to start with the first revolution that is linked with modern photography. This one is really important. Normally, they are talking of the beginning of the history of photography on 1839. This is the second revolution, but there were 2 revolutions, the thinking on photography and the capture of the image. Here we can see Thomas Whitwood and Humphrey Davy. Humphrey published an article at the beginning of the 19th century talking about the research of Whitwood and how they were chemistry, they were trying to fix the image, but they were not able to do it, but they were able to capture the image. This is really important. That's why I put here an image that is not there, because they were able to capture, but not to fix it. This is the moment at the beginning of the 19th century Thomas Winwood was working mainly in 70s, 80s, 70s, 90s, at the beginning of the 19th century. And it's really important because we consider this the beginning of experimental photography, even before of the beginning of commercial and industrial photography. Why we said this? Because for experimental photography, fixing the image is not the most important. That's why we work with a lot of techniques that are ephemeral and that are really nice to work with, okay? This idea of fixing the image is just interesting for more commercial or industrial photography. And this is the second revolution. This is a really well-known image of Niepce. This is the oldest surviving camera photograph. The word surviving is important because this means that they obviously were different people working at the same time, and this was the oldest one that we have, but probably there were other people doing research all over the world, finding new images. This idea of fixing the images was a debate on the 19th century because a lot of people talked about the mirror with memory. This idea of, as you saw, a glass or a metal that was linked with mirrors, and they think about this idea of this mirror having a memory. That was kind of changing the game of what photography was. This is the second revolution. And the third one is a double one. Is mainly based on Henry Fox Talbot research between the positive and negative process, because this is really modern. This is the ability of making many copies. That was not possible with other processes, as the one that we can see here on your left. We have different portraits from the National Portrait Gallery of Washington. These are daguerreotypes. Daguerreotypes was a process invented by Daguerre in France and was the first commercial photography. But the most important guy in this story, from my point of view, from an experimental point of view, there is a book of Geoffrey Batchen that you can see here if you see my camera. It's an amazing book about Talbot experimental photography on the 19th century. And we are going to do an exhibition at the festival this year working with this book of Batchen and also about Talbot, because the one that really changed the history of photography in this third revolution was this process of having a positive and having a negative. Because this is what Walter Benjamin talks about, the era of the reproduction of the image. And that is also what makes photography different from painting, because painting were unique images and photography was for the first time having this ability of having more and more copies. On the 19th century is going to be the century of experimentation, and we are not going to be talking about artists as we know them now. We are going to be talking mainly about artisans, inventors, and scientists. For us, 19th century is really important for experimental photography because in experimental photography, we have more than 120 techniques. There are 70 or 80 of them that were invented in the 19th century. That's why we work a lot with alternative and historical techniques, because 19th century was really an important moment for photography, but mainly linked with science. This is important. Photography and science were really close. Artistic photography was coming at the end of the century with Stiglitz and others. The debate was mainly in the 19th century, the relationship between painting and photography. This was kind of the debate because photography was looking for what they were doing kind of special, what makes special photography or different from other arts. And this was what made photography different, the ability of making many copies from a negative. Okay, that's why for us it's so important, Talbot. But in the end, when we think on the 19th century, normally in all the books and everywhere, you see a lot of realistic photography on the 19th century. As this is my job, I'm going to show you 3 experimental images on the same dates of the beginning of commercial photography in 1839. Here we can see some of the images of Talbot, flowers, leaves, and steam. This is a direct photography without the camera, close to what in a couple of years after these pictures were doing with cyanotype. In the middle, we can see a really well-known image from Johann Carl Enslen of the same year. Also is the face of Chris superimposed on a leaf. We can consider this as the first double exposure that looks like a technique really modern, but it was also done in the 19th century, mixed between natural flowers, Jesus Christ, and double exposure. It's a weird mix, but we need to understand that the 19th century is full of these kind of amazing images. As we can see here on Herschel, Herschel was another scientist, a really important inventor. He was doing these captures of the spectrum of light, okay, on the same, more or less, on the same dates, just to put another different context of what we normally see on the 19th century. And this is the 19th century, scientists, artisans, and inventors. The next revolution, and this is really new, is the moment when we can see something with the camera that we are not able to see with our eyes. This is the moment when the technology of photography is more powerful than our normal vision. You can see the image 2, 3, 4 in the moment when the horse is flying, so to say, is not touching. This was a debate. This was 1872, 1887, more or less, at the end of the 19th century. Edward Muybridge research, because there was a debate if the horse was all the time touching or not touching, if there were some moment, and it was impossible to decide. There was big questions and big debates about this. And then Muybridge, with his research, he was able to create this image when he was able to objectively justify that the horse was flying in some moments of when they were running. This is really the first moment in the history of the technology of photography that we can see things our eyes were not able to see. There are another story interesting with this one with horses, and it's the photo finish. As you know, the 19th century was full of horses, and the aristocracy of Europe was really happy going to this race horse, and they were spending a lot of money, and they were judges, people with their eyes saying who was the horse winning on the race. And obviously there were a lot of money, there were a lot of debates. There was another scientist, I didn't put the example here because it's too long, but there was someone that invented this photo finish, this photography that was able to know objectively between brackets who was the horse winning. That was kind of more or less the same moment, two different stories that help us to understand socially in this culture of the end of the 19th century, how photography, this new way of capturing the reality and seeing the reality, was, as a technology, able to show us something that we were not able to see. There was a lot of debate with these two stories, but they are interesting because they are on the base on this new revolution. We are going to see that this also happened with digital in some point, but think on this. Photography is a tool in some point that help us to see something that we are not able to see. There is a false revolution here with Kodak. Obviously, for the technology was really important. I didn't give it the importance of a revolution, but surely is really important because they really invented amateur photography and common photography, so to say, that being able everyone to make photography was this camera, Kodak number 1, 1888. As you can see, it has a circular. All the images were like this. What was really new from Kodak was being able to make a cheap camera, cheap more or less. Rich people from that moment were able to buy it, but they don't need to have any knowledge, any prior knowledge. What happened with the normal cameras, as we are going to see now, you need to know a lot of things to be able to have a camera, to control all the chemistry, the timings. It was a really hard thing to control photography on the 19th century. Normal people were not able to do it. But what was the thing here? What was the revolution? Kodak was able to make a film for the first time. It was 100 pictures film, like the one that we use now for the 35 millimeters. This was an invention of Kodak. They give you the camera with the film inside. You make 100 pictures, then you send it to New York, to Rochester, and they develop and print the film and send you the camera, the copies and the cameras with the new negative inside. You were not able to modify, in any case, the printing or the developing of the camera that you were using. That was pretty easy for everyone to use, but at the same time, it was cutting more or less this possibility of experimenting with the developing and the printing process. That's why we talk about the democratization, but at the same time, a limitation of the creative possibilities. As this is part of the industrial story of photography, we didn't give it a revolution, but for sure, Kodak was really important on the history of photography. There are a couple of really interesting books about this if you're interested. But the next, no, before this, okay, we are going back and just staying here. I wanted to show you a couple of cameras and ideas to make a couple of points on this. Okay, this is part of my collection of cameras. We don't care about this and this and this. When I said that photography was hard to, here we can see a negative, a glass negative. This is myself reflected on the, from this side, we have the silver gelatin, and from this side, we have the glass. This was really hard to do. This was really hard to prepare. These glasses, you were able to clean it and to put, again, the silver gelatin on it, but you need to have the technology, you need to know it. You really need to have a big bag for carrying these kind of negatives, and also it was really expensive. Obviously, the quality of this is amazing, but at the same time, it was really hard to do. You really need to have knowledge. And I have found something that I forget to show on the, this is part of my collection. This is for my family. Okay, how can I show this? This is an ambrotype. Okay, this is print on, maybe you can see it better here. These are two photographies of the end of the 19th century, print on metal. As you can imagine, they were really, really expensive and also hard to conserve. What was the idea with these two examples? That photography in the 19th century was really hard to do before Kodak invented, for example, these kind of cameras, like the Brownie. There were tons of models of them, but the negative here was much smaller. The negatives are going to go smaller, smaller, smaller. Here we can have an ACFA. This one was from my grandfather. This is kind of the form of the negative. And then when this changed, we came from that negative big one to this film roll. As we said, this was the idea of Kodak, that you can have in just one film, in this case, 36 images. This was much better, so to say, than having the other one with glass, or even with this one, 110 to 140, but you have just 8 images here that you can use, for example, for these Russian cameras, Lubitel, medium format. But the technology has been working always from one side, starting for making the negative smaller, but at the same time, they were losing the quality, but it was not so important of losing quality. The most important was to be able to make it as cheap as possible for being sure that other people, more people can use the cameras. Here you have another camera with format 110 and 120. I really like this camera. Also Kodak Instamatic, just to show you that the industry has created different negatives that we are using for making more industrial photography. Obviously, there are other kinds, but the industry has worked mainly with that. Okay, let's go back. Can you see my screen, Laura?
Sí, se ve.
Yes. Sure.
Good. Because something happened with the connection on the last meeting, and I just want to be sure that everything was working. Okay, as we said, the negatives were pretty big, then they get smaller, and then something happened, and First World War, revolutions, new ideas. What happened with this revolution was from one side was collage, appropriation of new images, but as a general idea, we are talking about Bauhaus, Man Ray, Moholy-Nagy, we are talking about Russian constructivism and surrealism in France, Dadaist all over the world. It was really the first big worldwide photography. Truly, surrealism was and Dadaism was the second one, because the first one was pictorialism, and the second one was this. I mean, all over the world, the people was working with this idea of the avant-garde, and also for the first time we had abstraction in photography. The idea important here on this, the fifth revolution, is this idea that we can create another world. Photography is not just linked on showing the reality as it is, but we can create another world. Obviously, this was on the context of the war, and also we can intervene and transform the reality in which we live. For example, if we see John Hartfield's work was really political, people was really using their techniques and the technology to try to change society. That was the fifth revolution. Obviously, in that context, Man Ray, Moholy-Nagy were super important. I just want to show from an experimental point of view the influence of the Bauhaus and Man Ray has no limits. This is a book about the history of Man Ray, biographical writings. I really recommend it because his story is really interesting. He came from Hungary. He left Hungary on the revolution, the conservative revolution in 1920s, and he went to the Bauhaus to teach. Then he left the Bauhaus, prepared his own studio in 1929 in Berlin, and then with the Nazis, because he was Jewish, he has to leave to America. He started working in Chicago, and he created the School of Chicago. That was the Bauhaus in North America. That is amazing. I have a couple of books about that story. Moholy-Nagy is really important. At the same year that he left to the US, 1938, it was an exhibition at the MoMA of New York. This is the catalog. 1921, where 1929, yes, 1939, I want to say. It was this book, this was a reprint of the original catalog of the exhibition on the celebration of the 50 years of the exhibition. But it was really important having this exhibition full of photographies and articles and works of art to spread the word on what the Bauhaus was doing in Europe, to spread the word in the US. This is a long story. I just want to give you a couple of ideas, but feel free to research more about what Moholy-Nagy was doing, because he was really a mind-blowing guy, not just working with photography, but with a lot of other artists mixed with photography. Okay, let's go back for the next revolution. You might know this guy. Instant revolution. We have finished the First World War. We have Polaroid for the first time presenting his first picture, 1947. This was massive. This was an amazing revolution. I'm always talking good things about Polaroid. Obviously now it's a big company, but talking about the industry and talking about the research, Land was a genius. He made two big revolutions. The first one was 1947. He came from on doing research on different lenses, and he created this camera for the first time that was able to create instant image. It was the first time from the beginning of photography that you were able to see the image that you were doing. As we remember, Talbot was doing this double process of taking the image, creating a negative, and then printing it. Land was able 110 years after the beginning of commercial photography, he was able to create the first instant photography. In this case, on the image that you can see on your left, you are going to see something special, that he is showing a negative and a positive, This was the camera that he prepared at the beginning. This types of film and camera is called peel apart. It has the negative and the positive. The second revolution that Land is going to do is 1972, the technology that he put on SX70, the new camera that was able to do direct positives. That was an amazing revolution, and this is kind of the cameras that we're using now. As you can see, is a direct positive. Is just one copy, as you can see in this image. This is a double exposure self-portrait of myself, and these are the kind of cameras that you can see that are direct, creating these unique cameras. What is crazy also about Polaroid is that it goes against this idea of Talbot that was really revolutionary at that moment of making multiple copies. Because what happened with Polaroid is, again, that you can just have one copy, but this was important for him because it makes it more important just having one copy. So obviously, nowadays, with the new technology of Polaroid that is half digital and half analog, you can make more copies, but at the beginning, that techniques on the analog world was impossible. This is the seventh revolution, is the last analog one, so to say, and this we are going to see here two guys. This is Wilhelm Flusser and Gottfried Jager in a conference in Germany, 1984, debating on what photography was, and also Wilhelm Flusser is the first guy and mainly the only one in the 70s and 80s thinking about what photography was and what experimental photography also was. There is a book, if you want to read more, is this one, Towards a Philosophy of Photography. I'm showing in my camera, if you're able to see it. It's translated to a lot of different languages. It's pretty hard to understand because it's mainly philosophy, but the ideas that he used to question the apparatus of photography are really important for experimental photography. And that is what happened in the 70s. In the end of the 60s and 70s, we're talking about the revolution of the 60s, the Vietnam War, and all these social movements going around all over the world of people thinking art in a different way. This is the beginning of contemporary art, is the beginning of conceptual art. All these artists that were able to question the medium. We are going to have the post-visualization. We are going to talk more about this, and this idea of meta photography. We can see here also, if you are interested, Gottfried Jager, a book about his work in Germany, concrete photography, experimental conceptual photography in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Really, really interesting. There is a lot of experimental photography in this context. As you can see also here, there is one of these reflections about photography, Tigre en l'appareil, de Jean-François Lecourt. What he's doing, he's making a self-portrait shooting directly to the camera. This shooting is going to create the hole or the pinhole that is going to do the portrait. That means that the shooting is at the same time creating his own images. There are a lot of reflections about conceptual art and how to question the system of photography. I'm not going to get longer on this. We have classes on the history and theory of experimental photography to talk more deeper about Wilhelm Flusser, but this is kind of an invitation for you to think what happened in the 60s and this 7th revolution. The next one is going to be the first digital revolution. And I want to say that there are we are going to talk about at least 3 digital revolutions, because not all digital photography is the same. The first one is linked with the dematerialization of the images. Here we can see Russell Kirch, first digital images, 1957, and Steve Sasson, 1975, the first Kodak digital camera that you can bring with you. It was 3 kilos, it was pretty big, and the amount of pictures that you can do was minimum, but it was the first moment. This was in the context of the Cold War, the US kind of going against Russia. They were going to the moon, and they were spending, really, the government of the US and the rest of the military countries, they were spending a lot of money on research, on science, that also helped to understand how digital photography became so powerful. and so useful. In this first digital revolution, we talk about dematerialization because we don't have a materiality. There are nothing physical, but these cameras are creating with energy this digital information. What I want to say is obviously there is no materiality, but this energy is spending a lot of space, okay, and a lot of resources. We don't see where all this information is because it's not with us, but it's in this sky, Google, this idea of having everything on the networks, but they are somewhere, okay? This is important. Digital doesn't mean that the materiality doesn't exist anymore. I mean, we don't have the negatives or the positives physically with us, but all this energy is having space and energy somewhere. This is the dematerialization. It's not really dematerialization. It's just another form of materiality. Okay, this is important. What I want to say on this first revolution on digital is that it was pretty similar on the way that analog photography worked. There was a lens, but there was not a photosensitive material. There was a sensor that captured the light and transformed it to bits, to numbers, to energy that was able to be saved and conserved and show. But the basic idea was pretty a continuity with analog photography on this first digital revolution. But obviously, this was really close to change the history of photography. This is dematerialization. When this start getting more and more well known, we can talk about 1997, for example. We have the Mavica, Sony, that was a bestseller. In 2005, we have the Kodak Easy Share. But in the 80s and 90s, something happened in the history of photography. This was the pinhole revolution. Some of you here are going to know what are these two objects. Now is the time, kind of participative part of the part. Heather, for sure you know this. Do you know what this is? And do you know what this is? Someone want to say what they are?
No, not really. Maybe I'm misunderstanding your question. No,
They're
not really.
pinhole cameras.
Yes, there are pinhole cameras done by yourself, do it yourself. You can create your own cameras. You don't need big technology. You don't need to spend tons of money. You don't need to have the best lenses. You can create your own cameras with just basic things at home, and you can create these massive cameras. These are part of the collection of the festival. This is a gift of Pavel Kula from an exhibition of last year. He's a really nice artist. These are different pinholes, okay? You can put the paper here, and you can make a lot of cameras, a lot of images at the same time. He was mainly using this for creating animation and video with different lenses. And this camera also, you have it here. You have to put the paper. In this case, the photosensitive material is a photographic paper and not a traditional negative. This is also important, and you can make different images with this. Another example of this is the image that you already saw. Paolo Gioli. Paolo Gioli was an amazing artist, one of the fathers of this pinhole revolution. We need to understand that we are on the best moment of analog and digital photography, big cameras, big industry, big enterprises. And then a couple of guys and women came and say, no, we're going to go against this idea because we understand that we can create our images from the basics. We don't need all this big industry. And what you are seeing here is Paolo Gioli's really well-known work, Puño Estenopeico. This is nowadays that people talk about a lot about selfies. This was a selfie with his hand. He put photographic paper, he opened, he made a selfie of himself, then he closed it, and then he developed the paper and everything. And what you can see here is his hand, that is the camera, and also the result. You don't need big technologies for making your own photography. He died last year, and we had a workshop as a tribute to him with Jeff McConnell that was really amazing. And we always talk about the pinhole revolution because it was kind of in the middle between analog and digital, and it's really on the base of the spirit of experimental photography that we have now. Also, there is another thing about this amazing revolution. You know, all these cameras, all of them has a viewfinder. Viewfinder means that you can pre-visualize what you are going to photograph. This means that you can see on the viewfinder what the reality is, and you can just press the button and take what is in the reality. What Pinhole said is that we don't have a viewfinder. We don't want to know what the photography is. We are going to co-create our idea with the photography and what the camera is going to give us. It's putting chance again on photography. They say viewfinder, you know what you are going to have. Working without viewfinder, you don't know what you are going to have, and that's fine. That's perfect. That's what we want. That's kind of the new thing that we are looking, and that was pretty revolutionary. Now we arrive to the internet. This is the second. This is the second digital revolution. You know, though, do you know which is the best camera? The camera, this one. Can you see my video? This is your best camera. It's the camera in your phone. This was presented in 2007 by Steve Jobs in San Francisco. This really changed the history of photography. If you have internet in your mobile phone, you can make infinite amounts of photography because you are uploading it to the internet. As we saw on this big negative, you were just able to have one negative and one image. With this, that is half of the size of the negative that I show you on glass, you can do an infinite amount of photography. And also you can share things on the internet at the same time. This for the young people as me, it doesn't look like something really crazy, but if we think on the past, this was impossible, and this was really a game changer on this situation. This is the second revolution on digital. It's the mix between digital and internet, and a lot of different scientific researchers talks about this moment when we are living in as post-photographic. One of the most well-known workers with this concept in the Spanish part of the world is Joan Foncuberta. You can have him here. And we use him because he wrote this post-photographic decalogue that can help us to understand what is happening. At the beginning, Foncuberta is saying that what is the most important with post-photography is that everyone can make photographies. You don't need money, you don't need prior knowledge and everything, because it's cheaper, it's smaller, you have it in your hand. This has really changed the reality because it's the context of the mass production of images and the infinite circulation and availability on the internet. That is a game changer, as I said. The first one, for example, is not so important now as it was in the past, creating these works, this idea of work of art of the 19th and 20th century. You have something materials that you can sell, that you can put on a gallery. Is not so important in this post-photographic era, the works, the products, but the meaning of the thing. It's going to be a debate about who can prescribe the meaning of the thing, the most important. At the same time, this idea of artist is not just the one that is working with these materials, because the materials are not there. The work of art has become so different and so specialized with different things that all of them can have an author. That's why he's talking about the curator, the collector, the teacher, the historian, the theorist. All these people has also a subjective point of view that can be also authoral. All of them are creating as if they were artists. Number 3 is ecology. I don't know why there is no number 3 here on the PDF, but this idea, Foncuberta is working a lot of this, with this, that in the end, if we have so many images, if there are so this saturation of images, we need to stop creating all this garbage of images. We need to think from an ecological point of view, encourage recycling and finding different ways to make images that are not creating more and more and more images, because all that is just the same and the same and the same. We're going to see an example of this on the next slide. On the 4 is more important. The circulation of the images than the image itself. Originality is less legitimate. There are appropriationist ways of doing things. It questions also the authorship. Intimacy is a relic, as you don't have no one in the middle between you and your images. Also, the private and intimacy can have a new meaning. This is also important. Originality is not so important. He also talks about the difference between the playful activities and the playful aspect that is going to be linked also with lomography, revolution, and others. This is kind of fun. There are nice, fun experiences. And on the other hand, there is a more boring thing, the traditional hegemonic work of art, and there is kind of a division between one thing and the other. Let's see, the most important is steering consciences. Okay, other ideas. I want to show you this next one is a project that is a conceptual project, obviously. This is Camera Restrictora from Philip Smith. It's a conceptual work. I don't know if anyone knows this project, but it's in this context. Give me a second, I want to show you a video. This is just a basic idea. There are so many images, we don't have to create more of them. The ecology of post-photographic era needs, can you see my video? Yes. This is the idea. If we want to encourage ecology, we don't need to create more images if there are a lot of them. This camera is with the GPS, is checking all the time where you are, and the camera for the first time in history is going to decide if you can do the picture or not. This is really mind-changing. Obviously, it's a conceptual project. And what happened is that the camera is not going to allow you to make pictures when you can use pictures from the internet to explain exactly the same. This is, as you can see, all the images. Okay, this is an example of a project. Philip Smith on this idea of ecology of post-photographic world. I really like this project because it really is a good example of what we are talking about. Then we have the 11 revolution, digital 4.0, that we are going to use an example of Chirag Jindal. You can find a conference from him in our YouTube channel. He was doing a conference about this project on 2021. He's a really, really good artist, and he was really happy to share with his project with us. This revolution, this third digital revolution, is really important because we can see things with this technology that we cannot see with our eyes or with analog photography. In this case, what I'm showing you is one of the images of his project done in Australia or New Zealand. I think this is a radar that is geo-localized. You can know exactly the points where this cave is. And then he recreated this 3D image from this scanning of a 3D scan of the reality to be able to see things we are not able to see. As I say, there are 3 digital revolutions. The first one was really close to analog, the one that you were able to have pictures in a digital camera. The second one was digital plus internet. And the third one is all this technology that allow us to create digital images with technologies that help us to see things that we are not seeing. That's why when we talk about digital photography, it's really important to know that digital is a really vast world. The same that analog, that is really complex, vast, there are so many different aspects. In digital, is the same. We're always saying that the digital, we need to work more on digital because they are working with a lot of new technology that can really help us to understand photography in another point of view. From the Experimental Photo Festival, in our conception of photography, we think that digital photography is also really important to know what photography is and what is going to be in the future. And then the 12th and last revolution we are going to be talking about in this fast story of photography is the analog and experimental boom. There are theologians say that the digital killed analog photography, and after post-photography, there were different communities working again with analog, abstract, experimental photography, and this created a new boom of these historical techniques that came. If you are more interested in this subject, there is a couple of articles of Sergio Miniti talking about of this defense of analog from these new communities created on digital. It's a mix between analog of digital, and they are defending analog. In these cases, we can see communities as Polaroiders, lomographers, or the people also coming to our festivals. We are from digital, we are trying to save and to recover all these aspects also from analog photography, and looks like we are in a kind of boom that there are a lot of people doing this kind of new researches. And in this context, what happens with experimental photography is that you don't have a preconceived idea of what you are going to receive. We are working with new ideas, and that's why we say you have to unleash your photography. You have to take your photography from the limits and find new ideas. We are going to be talking today about experimental, but this is also linked with alternative photography, historical, creative. Here I have more than 28 books on different of these conceptions of photography. They are pretty close to experimental photography. We have classes when we talk more about the details, but don't worry to work with this concept of alternative, historical, creative, and experimental photography because they are really close. Okay? Experimental photography from our point of view is, if we talk on Daguerre and Talbot from the beginning of photography, experimental photography is linked with science, research, innovation. If we think in Moholy Nagi's work, experimental photography is being at the avant-garde, mixing with other arts and multimedia. If we think on the manifest of the festival, this is a big definition. We don't want to close borders. We want to open concepts and give you some ideas on what experimental photography is. If we think in Marc Lenot and Willem Flusser, here we have Marc Lenot's books. Is the only one about experimental photography that we have, theory. And also we have this book on the Handbook of Techniques, that they are also part of this boom as the festival thinking. They want to question the system. They want to play against the apparatus and the program, because as Lenot says, you need to be self-aware, self-criticism of the limits of the system. From the festival, we also think that experimental photography is a collective search for the future of photography. Experimental photography is not just techniques of the past, but the application of these techniques to understand what the future is going to be. And obviously, this future is linked, as if we think with the whole, to the non-industrial photography. We need to think on this. We have been making some comments about the industry, and obviously experimental photography is linked with handmade photography and non-industrial. If we think on Jerry Welsman, he has an article from an exhibition of 1967 at the MoMA. He wrote an article really interesting called Post-Visualization. Normally what happened is at the beginning of the century, and also in the US in the 40s, 50s, 60s, they were always talking about pre-visualization. You need to pre-visualize your image, and then the camera is going to help you to capture. What Jerry Welsman is saying in the context of his own work and his exhibition at the MoMA is that we have the right of post-visualize. What does it mean? To see after, to keep going to the process till the end. The most important is this ability to modify all the aspects of photography. We are going to go back with this. If we follow Carvalho, that is a Brazilian thinker, that she wrote an article for one of the catalogs of the festival, there are 4 words that describe what experimental photography is. The first one is being hybrid. The second one is irregular. The third one is unpredictable. And the 4th, interdisciplinary. And what we are going to say, follow Robinson as the last idea of experimental photography is that it's a complete photography. What do we mean when we say complete? The industry, as we said with the example of Kodak 1888, that you have the camera and you have to send it to Rochester and they make the development and the printing. In photography, in experimental photography, what we know, what we want is to control all the part of the process. This means that you can make decisions on what you want to make a photography as the concept, the pre-visualization. But we also want to select the lens, the film, the copy paper, to do it with camera or without the camera, how we are going to take the photography, how we are going to develop and print it. Every moment of the aspect of the process of photography can be a decision. It's a moment when we can make a creative and an experimental decision and something that we can modify. All the decisions that we are not making is done by the industry. This is important. When you make just a picture with one of these point and shoot cameras, you put the film and you make pictures of a party, and then you just go there, they develop, they send you the JPEG image and everything. You have not decided anything than the images that you wanted to take, but you have not make any decision about the camera, about the film, about how to print it, how to develop, how to digitalize. All of them are aspects that we can intervene with our creativity, also to make it more experimental. I want to show you better these books, because they are pretty important. This is Marc Lenot's book on the ideas of Willem Flusser. It's just in French, that's a pity, but it's a really good book if you can speak French. And also we have the book of Handbook of Techniques that is also teaching a lot of these techniques of experimental photography that can help you to work more with. Obviously, we have the courses on Agora also, but this is also a really good book. We had Luca Vedandi at the festival, not last year, but the year before, explaining how they did the book. It was really massive, and the book was really hard to sell. As we said, this is a book 2015, 2017, and we start with the festival in 2020. This is growing, but at the beginning was really hard to sell this book because there were not so many people interested in experimental photography. Just to finish this part, just give me a second. The last idea, two last ideas. This is a negative. This is one image. This was 100 years. This is a camera. This camera was really a revolution, Lumix. 2006. This was 100 years before. You can do one picture here, and here you can make 1,500 images. This is what the technology has done in these 200 years, and there were tons of people making research in this. You can see yourself here. Nice. And also, not all the cameras are the same. I wanted to show you this. I'm going to make you a selfie. I don't know if you know this camera. This is a digital one for kids.
We are upside down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thermal printing. This is a digital camera. It's a really nice one because you can also move this and make selfies. This is a digital camera that is printing on this paper that is being modified by heat, and with the thermal camera you can print your own images. We call this the Polaroid of poor people, and we play a lot with this at the festival. And this is another kind of cameras that you can find on the market. Not everything is 35 millimeters or 120 or so. Okay, just to finish this first part. Maybe you know this guy. He's surprised for all the things that we are saying. Justin Quinnels. He's ready for having a brief reflection about the end of these 12 revolutions. We started with this 0 revolution, the first one of thinking on images. First one is capturing the images. The second one is fixing. The third one is making tons of copies. Then is the first revolution when analog photography teaches us to see something we are not able to see with our eyes, as you remember the photo finish and the horse's story. The fifth one is the avant-garde, creating another world. The sixth one is the double revolution of instant photography, as I said, with negative or without negative. In the 70s, with avant-garde, we have with the in the 60s with contemporary art, that's the thing. We have this ability of questioning the medium, post-visualization, meta photography. Then in the 80s, 90s, we have the first digital revolution that is linked to dematerialization. We have the pinhole revolution, going to analog, you can create your own camera. Then we have the second digital revolution that is post-photography. Then we have the third digital revolution that is these radars and things that we can create with this new technology to see new things we are not able to see with our eyes, and not even with digital or analog traditional photography. And then the last revolution is the analog and experimental boom that we are living over the last 15 years or so, and that we are part of now. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. We just ended with the first part, more the theoretical one and things. Thank you for being so patient and for listening to me for so long. Now we are going to start the second part, when we want to show you some references of different artists that we consider interesting. Laura, if you can share the Instagrams of them, that would be really amazing.
Sure, I'll put them in the chat. You can check their Instagram there.
Great. And then we are going to finish with some ideas for you how to work with these kind of things that we have been saying. I'm just opening the Instagram of them. Just give me a second. I think they are not following the order that I want to, but anyway. Okay, great. Now you can see my screen. Now you can see Ralph. If you want to follow, Laura is going to show you. He is from the Netherlands. He has been working with cyanotype for more than 50 years, at least. And he has been doing crazy things using a traditional technique, a cyanotype. As you can see this, what is really interesting, Ralph is going to be an example of the mixing technique challenge that we threw to the world on 2021 with the festival. This idea of mixing technique is really well linked with what Ralph is doing. He's doing cyanotype, that is a 19th century technique, but he's printing with new things. He's printing with a laser, okay? Something new, something old. He's mixing techniques. You can see a couple of examples here, but he's not just doing that, but the next step is he's going to use a modular synthesizer, okay? He's mixing music, waves to create images, and then he's printing this with the laser and then printing it on cyanotype. This is when we are saying this idea of bringing 19th century techniques to the present and thinking on the future. This is a clear example that I always present because I really love what he's doing. There is another one here. Here you can see how he's printing. And there is another one. As you saw, he was using this analog vibrations coming from music and synthesizers. And this is another thing. This is an harmonograph. This is a 19th century technology, just two cylinders interacting between them. And this is also what he's printing on the first images that we saw. This is also mixing an analog, using a digital technology as the laser to print it, to put it in a cyanotype of the 19th century. I really like Ralph's work because he's easily mixing one thing with the other. The second example that I want to show you is Naroa Perez, a work, how she's working, searching for a message, searching for a meaning on what she's doing. You can see here she's a really strong feminist, and also she's really happy with this idea of having affordable dark rooms. She found one in London. If you can go, it's really amazing. She also has a woman phototech training for teaching more women to be technicians on the darkroom. That's really important on her more political work, but on her personal work, she has been working. This is the last one. I don't know why they are mixed. Okay, this is her project. It's called the Trail of Touch. She's going to be mixing how touch, our sensations, our feeling with papers is linked with the way that we interpret images. This is a 20 limited edition of a book called The Trail of Touch, where she's using images done by herself of cactuses mainly. This is printed with silver gelatin on 20 different papers. And the most important is the experience that you can have touching the images. And how can you experience this idea of the cactuses that might have this kind of really strong sensation, how you can touch really, really nice papers, and this can modify the way that you see photography. She has this concept, she has this idea, and she finds a way to express it. But she's not just interested on the paper, but also on different formats and ways of showing. For example, we can see here with this cushion with 3D, what happened with these images going outside on this perspective that you want to touch it, but you can because it's a work of art. How can you experience this feeling, this sensation with this reality? And also this is another example of the same. On plaster, also working with this sensation of having different textures on her work. Next example, Sarah. She's a spatial engineer. She worked for the European company of spaceships, and she's really interested on this idea of volume, but also on this idea of working in a community. She did an exhibition for the festival that we are going to see now. She's really focused, as you can see, on her work, on these reflections from one side with herself, but also with this idea of the volume of the things, and also having things on public space. How can we use photography to put questions on our audience and to debate? We can see here, for example, these reflections coming from her research on the volume. This was part of her last exhibition in Madrid last year. And two more things. I'm going to show you this. This was an exhibition done at the festival on 2021 with Rubén Bejabalbán. They were working together on this idea of how to express and to show this community. And they create a family album of the festival. And this was the way, as she is really involved in working with volume and this idea. As you can see, she did this exhibition. Also, we were in the pandemics, and it was good to have the images everywhere. But the base of the concept was how you can show these images and how you can work from a community point of view. This was also a concept that she did in other exhibitions in Madrid, for example, when she was living at that moment, working with images, volume, textures, and things. I hope you like her work if you want to follow her. She's not doing tons of things. She's just having small projects, but all of them are really well things with this idea of volume and working on the community. These are the references that I want to show you. Obviously, we have tons of artists. The festival has had more than 125 artists, and I don't want to miss any of you, but these are perfect to explain these three challenges of the festival that are the ones that we want you to think for the future. How can we mix techniques? How can we search for the message that we want to say, not just doing experimentation by itself, not just doing experimentation because it's nice, because it's good, because it's aesthetically appealing. No, do it because it has a meaning, it has a message, it wants to say something, it wants also to change the reality. And also the last experience with Sarah was to go to this challenge about this idea of working with the community. You need to be together with other people working if you want to be stronger. And this is the first moment to talk about your research. Obviously, we have here artists of the festival. You have a lot of different levels and things, but this is just a basic idea because we want to give you some recommendations and ideas on how to start with your work or to keep working with them. This is an abstract, basics ideas of what we have learned. What I have learned being the director of Agora and having more than 80 students over the last 3 years and working with them and knowing what they need and the different moments where they are. The first and the most important thing is that you have to learn the techniques. The difference between photography in general, commercial photography, is that they have just one technique. It's just photography. It's a camera, it's a film, it's a photography. In experimental photography, we have more than 122 techniques. And when you register for any course of the Agora, the first things that we do is we send you a link with all the books that we have from the different theories and history. And also we send you a PDF with the 122 techniques for you to learn. And now we're going to start selling a promotion of different courses that you can have 6 months of learning more than 25 techniques all together. I mean, the classes are starting on April the 8th. I mean, now is kind of the moment if you're looking for learning more techniques. This is kind of the first step. When you know a couple of techniques, the most important is to prepare your project, understand more or less what you want to do, or what you have learned from working with the techniques, and try to choose the ones that fit better with the message that you want to do. Not all the techniques are going to help you to spread the word on the concept that you want to do. Each of the techniques helps with one thing or the other, because each of the techniques is linked with different concepts, and you need to understand the concept of the techniques to be able to choose the correct one. That is happening a lot with some of my students that normally they are used to work with one technique, but they have a new project. And this new project is not well fit with the technique that they already know. And they have to start to learn a new technique because each of the techniques are going to help them to express better what they want. It's important to learn the technique and to choose the good one. And you can start with this, with the courses of Agora, if you are interested. The second one after this, when you are working on a project, when you have different images and you want to have this inspiration and more ideas to find the message that you want to show, check social networks, books, exhibitions, but not just those linked with photography. Think broader, think outside of the photographic world also. As you can see in Ralph, this link with science. As you can see in Sarah, this link with engineer and planes. Everything can be an inspiration for us, not just music, movies, but also all the things that you know outside of photography can be an inspiration to give more information. Because as we said, one of the challenges is mixing techniques. You need to mix ideas from different points of view. Then after this, you need to make a lot of photographs. This is important, and you need to think what you are doing. This means not just shooting without sense. You can do that if you are having fun, but also when you have all these images, work with your own archive. Put all your images, see the relationship between them, trying to create a new narrative to see what all these pictures are saying to you. This is important. Now we live in this moment of the modernity that we companies are saying more pictures, make. We need to stop in some point, and we need to start thinking in our own archive or on the images that we have from the outside on the internet, or we have that we can buy on second hand. Think on those images. How can we recycle them? What are they telling us from us? How can we work with these concepts that are on the images? You can find inspiration everywhere. Everywhere you need to make a lot of photographies, and you need to think on what you are doing. And this moment of thinking, you need to seek the meaning of what you are doing. You need to have the meaning, the message that you want to say, and what you want to express, to be able to choose a technique, to be able to create your own project. This is really important. And this is the moment when we normally start working with the mentorship program that we also have in Agora. The mentorship is now more or less in the end. We are going to start again in September. You have enough time, if you are preparing a project, to join the class that is starting at the end of September. With the mentorship, it's really nice. We have different students from all over the world, and we are working as a community to give them more inputs and ideas for them to keep working. And if you want to have an individual mentorship, I also can do that. You can find all the information about that on our webpage. The next point that is really important when you have more or less a project is to share it with others. Don't keep it for yourself. Find a way to show with others, to look for a community that is going to work with you. Now, there are so many techniques, there's so many information. It's so hard to know everything that if you are working with others, obviously you are going to have an emotional support, but also you are going to have a technical support for keep working. Think always in working with others and sharing what you are doing. That's why we started the festival on 2019 with Laura, because we really want to have this community to help us on working on what we were doing at that time. That was double exposure. That's why we create the Experimental Photo Festival. As you know, the Experimental is going to happen this summer. In July, you can find all the information on our webpage. We have the artists. We already have the programs. And for those of you that are registered at the end of this month, we are going to start redeeming the workshops. That means that you are going to be able to choose the workshops that you are going to be doing at the festival. If you want to find the community, you can find it on the Agora, or you can find it on the festival if you can come to Barcelona. And then the last point to start, if you have more or less a project, if you have an idea, if you have a couple of images and you know more or less how the project is going to go, you need to find the right way to communicate it. What does it mean? Each of the projects needs a way of communicating. For example, some of them works pretty well in a photo book. Some of them work pretty well as an exhibition. But there are also other projects that need, for example, a workshop. And that is really good. There are projects that needs workshops to be spread, to be shown. And there are others that they need conferences, because it's more not a practical, but a conceptual thing. And these ideas of doing conferences or workshops about your work might be at the same level of doing an exhibition. Doing an exhibition is not the only way of showing what you are doing. And this is really important, because these new activities are much more interactive, and we need to start thinking also on these kind of ways of communicating our images. We can do a blog. If we want, we can do a web page. We can just share it on our Instagram account, that we can just take it seriously, because there are some of these projects that really needs one of these digital formats. That's why in the end of your project, you need to focus more on how is the best way to spread the word about your idea and your message and your technique, how you want to show it. Don't fall easily on the exhibitions and the photo books projects, because there are tons of other ways of showing we have been doing. And that is all what I have to say, an hour and 21 minutes. Thank you so much for being there. Now we have some time for questionings and whatever you need, whatever you want. We're here, me and Laura, for talking. I don't know if anyone wants to say something, if you have any project, any idea, you need any recommendation, or I don't know, Laura, if there were some questions on the chat that you want to bring into the conversation. Now is your time. I'm tired of listening to myself and also talking. I can do this for hours, but I'm tired. Now is your time to say nice things and also to share with the community other things.
Thank you, Pablo. Sorry if I was not visible at some point, but I was replying to all the messages. It was too much for me, but I was listening, and it's great to have you all here, like new people, and some people already know. It's really good. I saw some comments. There were a lot of questions about the books at the beginning, which I couldn't send all the bibliography. So I don't know if you have like specific question, just send us an email. I don't remember who was asking. And I don't know, no, they are already super professional, so they they have replied to all their answers.
We have tons of books about everything. I'm mainly buying books of everything related with experimental photography. I have more than 220. They are pretty amazing. If you have any question, we can just send you the link. There is a nice web that is called Abe Books. It's, I think, based on the US, but there are different ones in Spain. There is another one that is called Iberlibro. They are selling secondhand books pretty cheap, much better than Amazon. Always check there because they are really, really good things. I'm mainly buying those kind of books that are not so expensive, and it's nice. Beate, is there a submission for making photo books? We had that over the last 2 years. We have been doing photo books. We have one of them with myself, Camera Intima from Stephanie Probst, that you can see here. Done with pinhole photography, a really feminist and really nice work. You can buy it on our webpage. Yes, we did this over 2 years, but now we stopped doing it this year because we don't have so much energy for spreading on different projects. We highly recommend you to find different publishing houses that they are working with photo books. I mean, we can't specialize on everything, and we have just stopped doing them. But obviously, they are a really good way of showing your work if you want to do it. But I have to say that they are not so easy to sell. That's why it's hard to find people doing photo books. But it's nice. If you really think that your project needs a book, I highly recommend you 2 things. One is going to the artists' books that are artists mainly handmade, that you can make 10, 20, that you can work really manual with it. You don't need to make hundreds of books. Maybe with this idea of the artistic photo book, you can have enough. Or if you need something more more bigger but cheaper, at the same time, you can work with photo scenes. That is something also really good. Stephanie Probst is going to be doing a workshop this year at the festival and also online, how you can create your own photo scene. This is really fun, do it yourself, because you don't need really to spend tons of money. I can tell you that you need more than 3,000 euros for making a book. In some cases, that makes no sense. If you can just publish your own photo scene, that's perfect. And also, if you have something that you want to sell and you are coming to the festival, we have space to share books and photo scenes and everything at the festival, and you can use it. Marina, the one based in Spain, is called Iberlibro. Iber por Iberoamerica. I mean, it's the same. It's the same company because they are kind of having the same graphic design and everything, but one is based for Latin American countries and Spain, and the other one for the rest of the world. But some of the books are not the same, but you can buy in both of them. I mean, if you don't find a book in one place, you can check it on the other one or in Amazon, but there are normally cheaper secondhand books there than on Amazon. Laura, questions? Something on
Yes,
the...
see about the emulsion leaf project, looking for bigger sizes than normal Polaroids. If you know any other type of paper prints suitable for emulsion leaves.
Emulsion leaf on
Marci.
Polaroids, there are bigger formats that you can buy, but you need a bigger camera. There is a special thing that you need to put to use these bigger films on bigger cameras. I'm not a specialist on that. You really need to find it on internet. You can ask the artist working on this. We have, I can't remember her name. She's from the US and lives in Berlin. Laura, help me with this.
Sorry,
Okay,
what?
I'm thinking on the name of the artist. You can check on our Instagram. If you go to our Instagram, you are going to see a couple of different transfer and leaves in Polaroids, and you can write them directly and ask.
From Berlin,
Erin
Erin,
O'Leary.
sí, Erin O'Leary. I'm going to share the Instagram. Wait.
Great. You can find the artist of the festival, or you can ask. I mean, I'm not a specialist on Polaroid. I really like them. I have tons of books on Polaroid, but I'm not a specialist. But I do know that there are bigger formats of Polaroids. I can also tell you that they are pretty expensive. And I know some artists that has been working on doing different transfer leaf to mix with the same normal Polaroid, but mixing the transfers for making a bigger picture. That's also a possibility. And there is something good that we normally do. One idea that we normally do a wet transfer. I mean, we transfer the Polaroid leaf and wet, but there is also a technique to make it dry. If you want to try, this dry technique for transfer was mainly used in the 70s and 80s. There is a book of Barbara, this one, Caitlin, no, Barbara, no. Caitlin, this is from the 80s, is based on this idea of transferring Polaroid in dry. And also there are 4 or 5 different movies about what happened with Polaroid, the history and how they die and they came back with Impossible Project, all that story. Any of the movies that you can see on the internet are really good. This year we have 2 workshops. I mean, we have one workshop with Bruna Valenka about Polaroid transfer, the normal Polaroid one, and we have one in Spanish with Steffi Brusa. Vale? I don't know if you speak Spanish, but we have 2 different artists working with Polaroid. If you want to come to the festival, yes, Kume, Steffi Brusa. More questions, more idea, more projects.
I'm sharing the links. Wait, there is one comment. Final observation from Gabriele, which should not be overlooked for all of us, the preservation of our works. If today we can see what the first preserved photograph of Nietzsche looked like, it is only because a few years later it was reproduced on another photograph. Otherwise, today, that original photograph, we can see it almost completely black and unreadable.
That is true. And Gabriel, you can talk and you can explain us more about the
Thank you,
conservation.
Gabriel.
That's a problem that we have in our community, that we don't really have a lot of information about how to conserve our works. And I have been debating because I'm a specialist in 19th century and 20th century photography, and I have worked with archives, but this is a really specialized aspect, the conservation of our images. And also people is really specialized in one technique or the other. I have not been able over the last 5 years trying to doing this on having a conference about this, because it's a really broad concept of conservation on the different materials. The history of photography has so many techniques, so many different materials, that no one has been able or wanted to have this idea of explaining how to preserve them. We really need to start thinking on each of the techniques, and we hope in some moment we are going to find the right person to make this conference. But obviously, it's a big problem how do we conserve our images. It's good that you bring this. There is a couple of, there was a school, there was in the 60s and 70s a school, a pretty experimental one in Rochester, part of the Kodak Museum, Eastman Kodak House. They had a couple of books about photography conservation on techniques from the 19th century. You can check them because for sure there are things that we can use. I can't remember the name of the guy that was the director, but the space was really important in the 60s and 70s. The Eastman Kodak House, they have a school of photography really linked with the 19th century and experimental photography, and they were interested in this conservation. I have a couple of PDFs and things that you can find on the internet. This can be a way to start searching on this. Questions, ideas, projects, experiences. Any other comments, Laura, in the chat?
That's what I'm doing. I'm checking. Oh, I don't see it. Going
I
back.
saw. What was the questions about the books?
The one that you show.
The Moholy-Nagy one. If you are interested in the Bauhaus and Moholy-Nagy, we can start with this book of the Bauhaus of Magdalena Droste. She is the best researcher on the Bauhaus. This is a complete one. Then we have this one that is really nice, also the Magdalena Droste, but these are texts from different artists, participants, students of the Bauhaus, and it's really nice. There is a movie based on this from a feminist point of view that you can know more about the Bauhaus, especially on Moholy-Nagy. We have this. Sybil Moholy-Nagy was her second wife. As you know, he was doing images with her first wife at the beginning of the 20s. They split on 2019 in 1920, okay, or something. They split, and her wife wrote this book when he died, explaining a little bit what he was doing. This is also about Moholy-Nagy. All of these are pretty cheap books that you can find there on Iberlibro. This is about all the different articles on Moholy-Nagy, on the different aspects of Moholy-Nagy research. This is good because, as you can see here, it's not just linked with photography, because also with painting. Moholy-Nagy was working a lot with light, these educations. I mean, there are all articles of Moholy-Nagy about the different aspects, not just about photography, that can help us to understand better the way he thinks. Then we have this book. This is a reprint of Painting Photography Film, one of the most well-known books about Moholy-Nagy. And this is interesting because it's the example of typo photography, how you can mix typography and photography, and you can really send the message with the typography. What things are more important, less important, the movement, you can create the rhythm. Moholy-Nagy was really into these kind of things. Then we have this book about Albers. This was an exhibition in the US, talking about the Black Mountain College and Yale and Chicago. Albers was one of the professors of the Bauhaus working with color. I mean, I can be hours, as you can see, talking about Moholy-Nagy. I'm just going to stop with the next book. But this was part of an exhibition about Albers, the two different theories and concepts that went from the Bauhaus to the US. This is a really good one. This was an exhibition on the Tate Britain, and I want to show you the last one. There are other books, but about the Bauhaus, but this one, yes, this one, New Vision, 40 Years of Design. You can see it here, New Vision, 40 Years of Design. This was an exhibition done at the 70s. This was about all the experiences of Moholy Nagy in the US. How he worked with Callahan, Siskin, and all what happens in the School of Photography in Chicago when he died. This is kind of how this idea of photography of the Bauhaus was on the 40s and 50s and 60s in the US. As you can see, there are tons of books. The navy blue cover. Check this name, Richard. You can make a screen. You can find for this Richard something name. It's a pretty good one. Okay, a screenshot. Yes, Marta, that's the best. That's the best way. Then you
And
have tons of screenshots that you don't know what they are related with, but anyway.
the movie, Marina, you're asking for the movie the movie of Polaroid, right? There was one on filming, or which one?
No, at one point, Pablo told something about a movie related to the feminist point of view of this Bauhaus.
Okay.
Experience. Am I wrong?
No, you are not wrong.
Okay.
I just need to find the name, but it's not so hard to find because it's kind of a commercial one.
Mhm.
I don't know if this one, Lotte at the Bauhaus. Yes. Is weird. Yes, it's Lotte at the Bauhaus, the one that you are sharing. That is the one. You can see it here. I have just sent there. I don't know why, but someone in Facebook just shared it, all the movie. It's crazy. Just check it before someone take it out.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Now you have homework for doing this weekend. Jean Dubé, c'est le vocabulaire technique de la photographie, Paris, Marval, 2008, about conservation techniques. I'm going to write that down. Thank you so much for the reference. As you can see, we're a community and we are learning from each other because obviously you know a lot of things that I don't know.
It's a very, very complete book about conservation. Very thick, but because she's really a specialist, and I think it's even too much for us because it's so specialized about all the antique and contemporary processes. But it's quite interesting and quite expensive book. But you can find it secondhand.
Sure. Or maybe we can try to check if there is the PDF or something on the internet. Sometimes some of these books
I think probably.
But it's good. Thank you so much for the reference. I'm going to take notes on that. As I said on the Agora at the beginning, we sent this list of books, and probably and for sure we are going to put this book on that list because other people might be interested on the reference. And if you know someone wanting to do a conference, it would be pretty amazing. For this year, we are going to have Jeffrey Badgen, as I say, the author of this book. Jeffrey Badgen is going to be doing a conference about the history of camera-less photography. He's a really nice guy, and we are also going to be doing an exhibition about Talbot experimental work. This book is not so cheap. He's a professor in Oxford. It's not so cheap, but the book is pretty good. It's pretty nice. If you're coming to the festival, you are going to see the biggest part of the images because it's really inspired of this book, but it's everything about Talbot work. And we have different conferences, and I really wanted to have a conference on conservation, but it was impossible. Thank you. Okay, any other questions, idea? You are getting ready for your weekend. Those who are in the US, as you, Heather, and others, for sure you have more time for arriving to the weekend, but we are almost there in Europe. Friday night. Cindy, do you want to say something? Welcome.
He wants to ask.
I have a question. Hi.
Good. We love questions.
I wanted to know your pick, what you think about limitations, like self-given limitations. For instance, I'm gonna shoot now for 1 month on solely one lens, or I'm gonna shoot only in the nighttime, or I'm gonna shoot only on film. And this kind of limitation, do you think they can give us a creative boost, or they're just indulgent games?
Stephanie, what do you think? Is a boost? I saw you making this with your head.
Yes, I think it can be a good starting point. Like giving you limitations forces you to change your habits or try different things. And after that, you need to find more to have a real project, I think. To find a message or something to say about this limitation, or how to access this limitation, because you will be bored with it quite rapidly, I think. I would. But I give myself limitations, and I find myself being more creative because of that. Because I'm frustrated, I want to do more, and I have to find a way. So it depends. That's on you.
I think personally that there are moments for different things. I mean, there are moments when you need to spread your mind and you need to learn more techniques and you need to open because you're looking for something new. And when you find something and you have an idea, then you have to focus on this a lot and work and work and work and work with one thing to be a specialist and really to open the mind of this technique, knowing exactly how to work it. But when you know a technique and you have been working, I don't know, 1 year, 2 years or whatever, with just one technique, then you need to open again and bring new information and then mix techniques and bring more ideas and make a project with this and then try to think another concept. This is more or less the way I think things are going. Obviously, you can limit yourself, as you said, but these limitations are outside of your creativity. It's kind of a conceptual thing. It's kind of these TikToks thing saying, I'm going to publish one image all the time till I arrive to, I mean, there are external things to your work. I think it's kind of going to the gym. You know, if you get used to go to the gym, that's perfect because you can really be in well health because it's kind of mandatory for you to go. But there are some point that these external limitations can really make a limit for you. And if you're not enjoying what you are doing, and if you stop shooting, this limitation makes no sense. You know what I mean? There are kind of different moments when you need to do one thing to get deeper, then in other moments you need to open and you need to know where you are. What do you need at that moment? If you are working with a project, you really need to focus on that project, but that's also up to your personality. A lot of artists of the festival, they are working in 5 different projects at the same time because they are thinking on different things. But when some point arrive that you have a clear idea, you need to focus on that because your body is going to ask you to focus on this to finish this project or to give it a boost or to give it more importance. I think it's, at least for me, this is a personal opinion, it's much more important to know what your body is asking to you that bringing more or less outside limitations. You know, you need to decide what is the best for you in each of the moments. But I think it can be something positive or it can be something negative if you are not motivated. You know, if these limitations motivates you, it's great. At the moment when these limitations are not motivating you anymore, you have to leave them outside and you need to bring more and more and more ideas. I always think the creative project with my students as this. You have to open, bring new ideas, you have to focus, being a specialist, then you have to open, bring more ideas, then close again to make a project. And this is more or less how I think, at least for myself, and how I try to teach the students is the best way. But that depends on your creativity. I also have students that they have 12 projects at the same time. That's how their mind goes, you know?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here and for making questions. Now is question time. Any other idea? Any other questions? Are you ready for Experimental Photo Festival? Are you ready for joining the Agora classes? Starting on April the 8th, you always can learn more things. If you're not able to come to the festival, you know that we have the online festival. You can check all the conferences from your place. That's the way that we have found to be able to keep in touch and to keep being a community all over the year. There is a question. Thank you so much. Okay, if there are no other questions, I just want to say thank you so much in behalf of myself, Laura, and the 14 people working on our team. It's been a pleasure to have so many people sharing tonight, and we hope see you as soon as possible in Agora, in the festival, in social networks, wherever. Just feel free to contact us if you need anything else, and see you really soon. Have a good weekend, okay?
Bye-bye. Thank you
Bye,
so much, everyone.